Welcome to From Potential to Powerhouse, Success Secrets from Female Leaders, where female trailblazers share their journeys and the aha moments that made all the difference. With your host, serial entrepreneur and trailblazer herself, Tracy Holland.
Hi, everyone. It's Tracy Holland, your host on Potential to Powerhouse. Today, we have a powerhouse who is also someone who coaches other powerhouse women on how to be their best selves as a parent. Please welcome Katherine Sellery. She's a parenting coach and expert. She herself is also a 3-time TED speaker and an author. And as we're going to discuss today, Katherine helps parents and people from all over the world spend time being more conscious and thoughtful about parenting and how to communicate with your children to raise the most thoughtful, empowered, in touch children that we can. And I was so privileged to get to know Katherine, and we'll talk a little bit today about how we got to know one another. But welcome to Potential to Powerhouse. Thanks for joining me today.
I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, I love this. Yay.
Me too. And so you and I had this instant connection when we first met, which was during COVID on Zoom. So we didn't even get a chance to meet in person. We spent a year in a digital marketing course and class, and I got to know your incredible journey living abroad and a little bit about yourself. But I would love to just have you say a couple of words about your experience in meeting, because I think everyone always loves the origin story of like, how did I meet this incredible powerhouse?
So true. I totally agree. So yeah, it was so fun because, you join these programs, you never know if there's going to be somebody that's a like-minded soul that you want to hang out with, or if you're just there to learn the thing. And it turned out to be so much more, because it was an instant sort of, I want to know her. Yes. I want to hang with her. And this is so much more fun that it gets to become a friendship. So it's been just a blast getting to know you and to hang out. Yeah. Become friends.
Yeah. And honestly, you are helping so many parents around the world and so many thousands of parents you've helped. And listening to your TED Talk, I just had one light bulb after another go off. And as a mom myself, who's tried to balance building a company or multiple companies and raising 3 children, all 18 months apart, who are now 11, 13, and 15, and being in the heart of those teenage years, I just feel like you have so much wisdom to share today with women all over the world who are listening to be more thoughtful and mindful about their approach and just more aware, right? Because we don't know what we don't know unless someone points it out.
Totally. Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting how we stumble into our passion and our why and our, life sort of goal of what we're here to do. And I really had no idea that this was going to become the just my reason for getting up in the morning is to support this demographic of parents. And I don't know which of my TED Talks you listened to, but if it was the one on surviving unconscious parenting,
right? Because you don't know.
I have a feeling a lot of people could say that they survived unconscious parenting.
Right.
And, our parents didn't know what they didn't know. So God bless them, because of course, I believe everybody's always doing their best, no matter where it is and how appalling they might be at it.
1,000%. And in hindsight, there's so much happening, right? Where you look back on your own childhood and think, how could my parents have done this or that? And then you end up in the driver's seat with your own children. And I think that there could not be a truer statement than truly you don't know what you don't know until you have the benefit of someone pulling back the curtain. Mm-hmm. And then having some of your own hindsight review about choices you've made raising your own children and thought, who was that made that choice?
Totally.
Like, yeah, that was crazy. And I wish I had met you when I had just had my first child. Mm-hmm. And I think about the outcome in my own my raising of my own children and how I could have been more thoughtful and aware and conscious. And ironically, being the daughter or being born of a parent who was really quite abusive, I thought I came into the world thinking I'll never do what my mother did. And my pendulum swang way the other way.
Yeah.
To overcorrect and be the parent that I thought I never had.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably true. I'm curious to hear from you that story is common with every single person you talk to.
I think it's really common that we go through our family of origin, and there's so many things we look back on that we at the time didn't experience the way we look back and think about it now and think, wow, did they really do that? What were they thinking?
Right.
And, and I agree with you. We overcorrect, we swing in, certain directions. We might become, depending on the upbringing, if you had really authoritarian parents and you felt like you were never seen, heard, and understood from your perspective, and it was only all about them and doing what they said, and your job was just to say, sure, I'll jump how high, and that was about as much of you that got to be included in that conversation, then you may overcompensate to the point where you kind of relinquish your role as a parent and you become permissive of maybe a whole bunch of things that you're not really okay with, but you don't know how to navigate being present with your no in a way that's not power over. I mean, these are really like nuanced distinctions about ways of being in relationship with children as they grow from little to, way up. And I have, I've been working with parents for so long. And, I just think about the people in my training right now. Some of them have kids in their 20s. Somebody reached out to me the other day. Their children are in their 40s. So it's not really about little kids, because a lot of people think it's about the little tiny ones. To be honest, those are the easiest years. And how you do that, however, and how you set up that foundation can have a trickle-down effect for many years. And I talk about resentment flows that get developed. And if resentment flows start developing in those years, then you'll see the backlash from that later. So sometimes I talk about the difference between children that are the belongers and the ones that want to please you, and the children that are really autonomous and self-determined. And that category can often come in a package that people call defiant. And there's actually a whole thing called oppositional defiant disorder. And that cracks me up every time I hear it, because all I can think is, this is a child with really high autonomy needs, which means that they are prepared to risk your displeasure in order to stand for themselves. And those kids become troublemakers, problem children, when actually they're not problem children, but they have a problem with power over. And they're in a very small section, like 20 to 30% of the children on the planet are prepared to overcome what we call the psychological differential between an adult and a child. Most kids won't be able to do it and stand up for themselves. And they will actually just go back to obedience and compliance, which is, in fact, an extremely dangerous way to raise a child. Because if you train someone to be obedient and compliant, they will not be able to distinguish to whom that person that they're being obedient and compliant to has their best interests in mind, and to those who don't. So what we really want children to learn is how to be considerate, not obedient and compliant, to be thoughtful and considerate, to be able to take the input from the other in, and to be able to weigh it against themselves as well, and have a feel into, I would like to be thoughtful towards you in this way. Yes, I am willing to do la, 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 versus I'm going to do it because I'm afraid of you. So it's the cornerstones. It's dependency and fear as the, fulcrum point in the relationship, versus thoughtful and considerate, where thoughtfulness and consideration flows both ways, and it's not age dependent. So if you wouldn't talk to another adult that way, why would you talk to a child that way? And some kids know the difference. Like, my daughter, Pia at a very young age would be able to say to me, Mommy, that lady would never have spoken to you that way. So she picked up on the nuance of really, it's a prejudice against children. It's a negative view of children's behavior. It's assuming that they're going to try to take advantage of you, or they're out to get you, or they're manipulating you, when in fact, they're just human beings trying to meet their needs.
Right.
But there is, in fact, a whole mindset that's been over centuries of, children are to be seen and not heard. And, we can think of all of those, expressions that actually inform our behavior as adults.
I mean, I don't know about those listening, but like multiple times during what you just said, I got body chills because it resonates so deeply for me in this power over and the repercussions of this idea of controlling children, making them be compliant, and ensuring they're seen and not heard, and what the implications of that are.
Yeah.
It's kind of blowing my mind.
Yeah. Well, I grew up with a mother who was from New Orleans, Louisiana, in the deep South, and it's all about appearances. It's all about good manners. It's all about what will the neighbors think. And I don't think that's just the deep South, but it's definitely the deep South. But I think it permeates into a certain level of society where we want our children to make us proud.
Right.
As if that's even possible, right? Because then it begs the question of, well, do really other people make us feel? Is that even possible? But we grew up, and I would say it's pervasive in society that other people make us feel. I mean, we were talking about this a little bit earlier when we notice other people getting triggered. And so the distinction is, did this person catalyze it within me, or are they the cause of my expression? If I say you make me feel, then I'm saying you're responsible for my feelings, which any logical person knows it's not possible.
Right.
But if you recognize that we are in an interdynamic relationship with everyone in the world and the world around us, then we have experiences of other people. And those experiences can touch something inside of us and activate. And we saw this happen just the other day with, Will Smith at the Academy Awards, when he was activated and catalyzed and he lost it. We call it the tragic expression of the unmet need. It was a tragic expression. So through the lens of looking at all behavior as neutral, it's not good, it's not bad, it's not right, it's not wrong. If you can believe that, and this could even catalyze people listening to the podcast today,
right?
Where there could be a really strong, no, there's right and there's wrong and there's good and there's bad and la, 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 la. And I would say, I get that. I can certainly fall into that paradigm as well. And Rumi, the Persian poet, said, there's a field over there beyond right doing and wrongdoing. I'll meet you in that field. And that's a total shift in consciousness to the observer state of mind, where I'm an observer of everything that's going on around me. And I can see that, yes, this is the tragic expression of an unmet need. Yes, it's socially unacceptable. Yes, we would prefer that people didn't do these behaviors. And yes, it causes harm. All of that is true. And here's the thing. When we're catalyzed and we're triggered, and everybody knows this idea of being triggered and having their buttons pushed and other people lean in on that button, but they didn't put the button there. It existed prior to your entry.
Right.
And other people have leaned on that button too. And when that button is leaned on, this person tends to explode, which means that there's a button that needs to be attended to within. And every time they experience the explosion, there tends to be, just as he's done. And I think that he's handled this so beautifully. I'm sorry. I'm embarrassed. I apologize. Everything about it, I wish I hadn't done.
Right.
And who of us has not been catalyzed, exploded, and been triggered? We all have. It's part of the human condition.
Right.
And the only thing that I think we can all do is take responsibility, stand up and say, I regret what I've done. I lost it. It's not what I wanted to do. We do that in everything. We do it in our parenting. We do it in our adult relationships. If we get lost in thinking the other person made me feel, then we don't apologize. We continue to blame them as if they were responsible for it. And we're lacking accountability in our own behavior.
Right.
So that's the one thing that I would say is the key to when we lose it. Of course, we don't want to lose it. Of course, we don't want to repeat destructive patterns. All of that is true. But when we look through the lens of the tragic expression of an unmet need, then we're able to see the surface behavior as the surface behavior and look past it down to what is the underlying unmet need that gave rise to the explosion. And you can take that into all of our relationships.
Right.
And you see your children lose it. Do we judge them as bad, wrong, needing to be disciplined for having lost it? And that discipline usually involves a reward, a punishment, a timeout, a go to your room, a removal of a preferred activity. And that's how we remedy it. And I would say there's a difference between punitive and restorative justice. And punitive justice is all about, I'm going to make you pay for that blunder. And that's the entire, prison system in America. It's based on this idea of you have to pay for that.
Right.
Restorative justice is, okay, we're going to give you the skills so that you don't repeat that ever again.
Right.
And of course, what you did is not acceptable. And you yourself know it and acknowledge it. Now let's focus on giving you the skills to be able to manage your world, your internal narrative, so that this doesn't repeat.
I think that if every person listening has not logged in yet to consciousparentingrevolution.com to sign up for your course, they need to right now.
Immediately.
And honestly, even if you're thinking about having kids and haven't had them yet, you should be thinking about getting into this mindset today, because it is like, I don't know about you, but every time you speak, like the aha, it's like every minute I'm going, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. Why this all makes sense, but why does this not resonate in that? That's how I should have been in raising my own children. It's like anything we do, it's literally awareness, and then practice that awareness, and then find the tools and get the tools in order to execute on it in the moment in which it happens. Because when something triggers me in my relationship with one of my children, especially 13 and 15, where I can hear pretty regularly an eye roll or I don't have to do that, or that makes no sense. Like, or even something as blunt as like, I don't care what you say, I'm not listening to you, like verbatim. No,
ears like, yeah.
And it's funny because my first reaction in those circumstances is to say to them, I would never speak to you that way. I do not disrespect you in that way. You don't have to agree with me, but I don't speak to you that way. So I don't expect to be spoken to in that way. And it's literally the only tool I have while I'm pausing long enough to think about what else can
I say? What else can I do? So, I had a woman on a coaching call yesterday who was talking about how her son was so upset when dad unplugged the Xbox and he died in the game, that he'd been working to get to the next level for like hours, right? So he was on the verge of a next level of mastery. And dad just unplugged it and walked in front of it and said, this is enough. I've told you, you have to get off, and you haven't gotten off, and blah, blah, blah. And then the boy proceeded to throw things, kick things. He literally knocked the door down, right? So he had a huge emotional response to power and control. So, I mean, basically I would say, who's got the problem here? Who's got the problem? And I mean, honestly, both had the problem. Like dad had a problem and the boy had a problem. They both had a problem. They're both in the problem zone. It's always important for us to figure out if somebody is in a problem zone. Let's take your example where one of the kids is saying things to you that I'm going to call it socially unacceptable, right? So we could also call it the tragic expression of their unmet needs. Do they have the skills to be able to say, I feel upset, worried, mad, whatever the feeling word is that's coursing through their body at the moment, and then tie it back to their underlying unmet needs. Because my needs for self-expression or my needs for choice, which is often the case with kids, they feel like they don't have choice. My needs for autonomy, my needs for self-determination, my needs for belonging, goes on and on and on. But when we begin to anchor, this is nonviolent communication. Nonviolent communication is the ability to express ourselves, self-disclosure, by disclosing my feelings and my needs, as opposed to I feel this way because of what you did. Mm-hmm. And then we're back in the land of victim blame consciousness. But empowerment comes from recognizing that, yes, this catalyzed me when you took my thing away. And these strong feelings arose within me. I'm so mad at you, Dad, because you took away my choice of when I turn this off. And by you choosing without me being a part of it, you wrecked my game. You wrecked my ability to rise to the next level. You could say disrespected me. So disrespect is obviously a judgment word, right? It's not really a feeling. It's not even a need. It's a judgment of, I'm going to evaluate the way I'm feeling when this person did this thing, and I'm going to label it as disrespectful. So now we're back in the land of judgment. And evaluation is the thing that gets in the way of us staying neutral. It's our own narrative. It's the one thing that we have 100% control over, is how I'm framing this, because how I think about things commands how I feel about things. My narrative about this situation is going to command my actions, because I'm telling myself that you deserve to be punished for having made me feel this way.
Yeah. And P.S., I don't know about everyone listening, but how many times can you apply this to the relationship with the person that you're in love with, right? Or the husband or the wife situation? This is exactly the same thing that takes place in the relationship dynamic as it does with children.
Yeah, it's exactly true. So, the conscious parenting revolution is also about parenting your inner child. So, you mentioned earlier, sometimes, maybe you don't even have kids and you're thinking about it. Well, I would say, yeah, absolutely. I've had people in my course who don't even have kids, but are thinking about it, and they don't want to repeat their own personal experience.
Right.
And there's some stuff in here that's still wounded, that still hurts. And every one of those hurt places are actually the things that are the triggers. Right? So if we go back to Will again, that response came from a wounded part. It also came from a protective part. And he acknowledges that. I did the very thing that I never want to do, is be violent. And yet it came from this incredibly protective part of me where I'm trying to protect my wife. And so we can all have compassion and understanding for that action coming from that place, and still know that the action was flawed. Then the next step is, what do we do about it? Somebody who believes that you have to punish someone for them to learn their lesson would find the right punishment next, in order to really deepen the understanding that what you did was wrong. Now, this isn't to say that people who are making it, let's go back to the prison system, that there isn't some place for, containment. There is. Because if you can't learn the skill, or if you're not going to take yourself and your own interior woundedness on, then you are a potential risk to all of us.
Right.
Because we can't control if we're going to happen to, tap into one of those wounds.
Right.
And then you're going to go flying off the handle in an out-of-body experience where you're not even present. Right. You have lost your presence to yourself. So being present means that I no longer associate my sense of what I call self with my thoughts or my emotions or what's going on inside of me. Instead, I'm bigger than what's bugging me. I have a sense of self that's so expanded that my sense of being and presence can be present to everything. To the part of me that's aching, to the part of me that's wounded. I can be with all of those parts if I don't think it's who I am.
Right.
If I'm merged with it, then I don't have a consciousness expanded beyond any one of these dimensions. But our right role is the observer. Our right role is being centered in a way that we can be with and present to all of it, not push it away, not pretend it's not there, not neglect it, but actually be with and be present to all of it in a way in which it feels like we can accept ourselves just as we are.
Right. And I think for those listening who say, gosh, I had so much trauma as a child, or so much trauma, I don't know how to unlearn these learned behaviors. It's kind of ingrained in who I am. It's the way I react. It's intrinsic in who I am as a human being. I think it would be helpful for those who are listening and feeling that way, for you to share some of your own childhood experience that led you to this work.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, when I was a little girl, my grandmother would point to me and say, she's the one, sweetheart. She's the one. She's the one that will take care of you. So sweetheart was my mother. And my grandmother, it was like a spell was cast. And at that time, I was indoctrinated into, it was my responsibility to take care of you. And I took my job very seriously.
I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah. And I didn't realize, to be honest, I didn't realize until my mother passed away 10 years ago. Even after, being in every self-development course and every training and every spiritual retreat you can think of, I didn't actually recognize until she actually had passed away how much I had been cathected, the degree to which I had been cathected. And that's when I actually opened up The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller. And I read it for the first time. I carried it around with me forever, but I never actually sat and read it. I would quote it in lectures I gave and courses I gave, but I didn't really take all that she offered until after my mother had passed away. And I realized one day, literally, I was going up to the kitchen, from the kitchen to my office in Hong Kong. I saw it on the bookshelf and I was like, oh yeah, Alice Miller, The Drama of the Gifted Child. And it was like, that experience, I bet everybody's had that, where life just takes you to that one thing. So I was drawn to it. I picked it up. I went upstairs with my tea and I literally sat there and read the whole book that day. And I just felt like my whole sense of self and understanding of my life unfolded as I began to understand what she spoke about. And she said, when your caregiver themselves were not mirrored and reflected to as a child so that they had a sense of self, they will cathect their children in order to reflect back to them so that they can literally begin to feel constantly that they are valid, because their children will reflect back to them what they're feeling. Ooh. So the dilemma for a child is that, first of all, it all happens with no consciousness whatsoever. It truly is like a spell has been cast until you awaken from it. And, I guess I could say the journey for me has been to go from literally being my mother's oxygen tank, spending all my life, wanting to make this woman happy. And believing it was my responsibility and doing everything I could to make her happy, and still finding that there was unhappiness there, and not recognizing that it was a dilemma. It was like a Rubik's Cube, that she had indoctrinated me to make her happy while at the same time saying, why are you trying to make me happy? And it's like, oh my God, this is like a dilemma I can't come out of. And realizing in my own life that I had done everything. I was the overachieving child who, every accolade, every award, every this, every that. In my heart of hearts, it was like, see mom, you're okay. And my life was basically in service to her psyche to feel okay. And I remember I had lost 2 siblings. My brother died by suicide when I was in high school. My response to which was to double down on achievement so that mom didn't feel badly, like somehow it was her fault. And then when I was in law school, at the end of my second year of law school, I had a sister who died from a brain tumor. At which point it was kind of like the universe and I had to, come to Jesus.
I bet.
I just was like, okay, I surrender. Yeah. Like I got to get so much, I got to understand like this life thing better. because I don't understand, like, all this loss, all this grief. It's like, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And so I took a leave of absence, top third of my law school class. I just was like, all right, I'm out of here. And I went and went and lived in this little cabin outside of Boulder in Nederland, Colorado. And I rented it from a guy who was an American medicine man. And he would spend his summers on reservations. He also was a student of Alan Watts. And he had everything Alan had ever spoken, recorded, written down in this little cabin in the woods. So I did my chop wood, carry water. My sister left A Course in Miracles in my car. God only knows to this day how it got there. And I started doing A Course in Miracles with this little group once a week. I drive to Denver. And I just had to figure it out. I had to just get around all of this. And that's when I remember saying to my mom, when she was trying to convince me to go back to finish my last year, I said, Mom, everything I've ever done is for you. Everything in my life I've done is for you. And she said, oh my God, your brother said the same thing to me.
Ooh.
And that's when I realized, like, this is transgenerational trauma.
Yep.
This is, in spite of herself, she didn't realize she was oozing this out. She wasn't aware of her own wounding and the fact that this trauma that she held from not having been seen, heard, and understood from her perspective as a child, that she wasn't allowed to separate and individuate, that she didn't allow her children to separate and individuate. And that in my brother's case, I think it killed him. And in Melanie's case, she died of a brain tumor. I think it kind of killed her too. It was killing people. So when I say that we have to wake up to recognizing that whether we intend to do harm or not, if we're not aware of the trauma that we experienced and the ways in which it's being passed down into our own parenting and relationships beyond that, then we may be doing harm, not wanting to, but inextricably it could happen because of these patterns that we haven't shaken ourselves and awakened from the spells that have been cast. So I ask, and I'll ask your audience, do you feel like you were cathected? Yeah. How many of you might be experiencing that sense of, oh my God, yeah, I felt completely responsible for my mom or my dad or from some other caregiver.
Right. And I didn't even know that word until I met you.
Yeah.
Like I had never even heard the concept, the word, the theory, the philosophy, but I feel so resonant with that experience and understand how that can be so confusing. And then the trauma for me, at least with my own mother, of what she would do to me, where I'd feel so responsible and try to please, and yet get such, there was so much violence in the house and so much trauma around that, put me in a place of feeling defiant and really isolated, and then also people pleasing and responsible for her happiness.
Yeah.
That really resonates. And
it's so complicated.
What I think is so unique as well about your story is how right at that time you were led to this cabin with all of this material and the book Course of Miracles being in your car. And strangely, it is exactly that time, 21 years of age, that I was first introduced to Course of Miracles.
No way.
Yes.
That's incredible.
And I would say to you, it's the same. If I were to try and experience what that feeling was like, I think it was at that time feeling like I was out in the middle of the ocean, treading water, not seeing land. Yeah. And literally the Course of Miracles was this raft that floated by. And I was like, shit, I'm going to grab that. And just get on it. And thank goodness for that experience. But that is, to me, divine intervention, right?
I felt like that too.
Yeah. It's these like moments of divine intervention, because I literally think that you probably would have had a totally different career path.
Oh, my life would have been completely different if it weren't for Melanie's death.
Right.
And so I say, in my heart of hearts, I think, wow. I mean, if I step away from the whole landscape of our experience here on planet Earth, and, I do believe in reincarnation. And so I believe also that, our physical form is not really who I am. It's who I am this time around.
Yeah.
And that sense of transcendent self, flows, for the millenniums. And so the people who show up in form in my life and who have come through for periods of time, be it my brother, be it my sister, that they came through and each of them had their own journey. And it deeply impacted my journey, that interrelatedness, that inner relationship. And I know I would never be doing what I do if it weren't for the fact that these had been people in my life where I think every day, let's not have anybody else die. Let's not let anyone else feel like they're betraying someone if what their inner experience is doesn't match the person in power and authority. Yeah, I just feel like that one step of allowing someone to have their own distinct experience without making it about your experience of them having their own experience, that's a big step for a lot of people in families, not to just focus on my experience of you.
Yeah. And I guess just to touch on the generational trauma that you're describing, because it's so interesting, this idea of generational trauma. It's certainly true in my mother's family and the lineage on her father's side that had been carried down from, great grandfather to great grandfather to grandfather to my mother. And I always thought, gosh, I'm going to be the person who stops this. This is not going to continue. I will not be that person in the family, and weirdly ended up marrying the person who I ended up having and watching repeat some of the things that had happened to me, to my children and to me. Right. So I think this big aha that I'm sure other people are having in hearing this conversation is how important this material is, and the tools and the skills and the awareness around this topic and how it impacts not only your interaction with your children and the childhood trauma or the continual intergenerational trauma that continues, but also that this can play out with the person that you're married to in the same way that it did to you as a child.
For sure. I mean, it's almost like if you take a card and hand it to someone, you're basically giving them this script and saying, okay, now you're supposed to read this. So this is the way that these patterns repeat unless we break the pattern, is that we will keep drawing to ourselves the thing that we're searching for completion from.
Holy smokes.
And you can, maybe you have that realization. I know I did when I started really tapping into all this work, was that I could look through my life and see where I kept drawing the same situation to myself. The face of the person might look different, but the underneath part and the dynamic and the dance that we were in was identical over and over and over and over and over again, until finally I awakened to recognizing that it wasn't about this person out here that I needed to be in relationship with. It was about this being in relationship within, and being with this part that was pulling this to have the resolution. That was the part that needed me to be with it. It needed me to be present to it. It needed me to be able to hold space for it to go through and experience relationally what it was craving at the time, which is most often usually linked to somewhere, 0 to 5. Could be later, but it's a lot of times 0 to 5, undifferentiated consciousness, where that sense of me and you is really mixed up, because I don't have that idea of me being separate yet, which is why peekaboo is so much fun for a baby, because they don't recognize that it's like, oh my gosh, you're still, oh wow, that whole fit, whoa.
Yeah, that's such a great example though of the experience. And I think if people aren't going, oh my gosh, and rewinding and listening to this again and saying, this is blowing my mind, then you're sleeping.
Wake up!
Wake up, because this is the difference between living an okay life and living an epic, game-changing experience that we call life in this context. This is the difference. And I've watched you with your own children and your own family unit and how beautiful it is that each of you is in your own independent self and own expressive self, and just so thoughtful, but everyone's so loving. Like Pia just grabs Sam and Sam grabs John and you grab Sam. It's just like, so much love in this family and each of you have had your own independent experience. And yet there's such a different and healthier, more vibrant way of living that I admire so much. I'm so curious if we could close the loop on the relationship you ended up having with your mother prior to her passing, when you had this awareness and all of this aha, and like, I was affected and groomed to kind of ensure her happiness. And like, what point did you choose to differentiate and recognize that? And then what was that relationship like when she passed?
Well, I mean, honestly, I was cathected until she died. It wasn't until she died that I stumbled back into the Alice Miller land and could embrace. And I'll tell you what I realized. For me, it would have been too much of a betrayal that I would not have been able to. And that's obviously why I wasn't really able to take on the knowledge that Alice Miller could share with me until after she was gone, because I was just so deeply cathected. And I think my mother also recognized that, unfortunately, we weren't skilled enough to be able to manage this very complex relationship. But she said to our hospice worker, you have to help my daughter let me go.
Ooh, that's heavy.
You have to help my daughter let me go. And it was, again, one of those things where, my entire job on the planet for all my life was to keep her alive. And so I couldn't figure out how to let her go. Right. So I was still dragging her all over the planet, taking her to every specialist known to man on Indian reservations in Montana and, you name it, and dragging her around the planet to heal her, because that was my job. I'd been cathected to believe I was to keep her alive forever. And I took it seriously. So it wasn't until after she passed that I started doing the work of really differentiating myself, separation, individuation, and being able to love and appreciate the incredible presence that she was. I mean, my mother was an amazing woman. And I would often say the only person in the world that seriously frightened me.
That feels very familiar to me. And I certainly do not have anywhere near the tools and the skills you have, but I can tell you that where I recognize in myself awareness at this next level is a deep level of compassion for my mother. My mother's still alive. I'm not seeking time with her, nor do I have a long relationship or a deep relationship with her in any way now. And I'm not sure if I can prior to her passing. But what I can do is I can really feel within myself just a deep level of compassion for how hard it must have been for her with the lack of tools and skills that she had based on her own childhood.
Of course.
Of her doing absolutely only the best she could with the tools she had, and have told her that, I've said, listen, I don't hold any bad feelings or any grudges. I really, really feel deep compassion. And I can see her as a 5-year-old girl, really just a beautiful little girl trying to figure out how to be a mom,
Yeah.
So I really think this is all a lot, right?
Yeah, the thing about if you have that sense of knowingness, if that resonates for you, the intensity of the relationship and my role, I mean, I was the baby in the family, and I was the one who was going to make. It's so funny to look at the other people in my family. One of my sisters, she was so rebellious, and she was the one who would take her on, and she would have these massive, huge arguments. And at the time, I just remember thinking, how could you do that to mom? And how could you be like that to mom? And, all this kind of stuff. And as an adult, I look back and I'm like, wow, you had the power to stand up that I did not have. And we played such different roles. And I can now look back and admire how strong you were to be able to disappoint her, stand up. She actually figured out how to separate and individuate in the relationship, which I didn't figure out how to do until the relationship in form had ended. And then that's when my next level of, sort of awareness around that whole thing developed. Yeah. Wow. So, self-compassion is really the name of the game.
Yeah. It is the name of the game. And, you haven't met Coach Karen yet. I can't wait for you to meet her. You have a lot of the same philosophies. She coaches powerhouse women and high achievers on how to be gentle with yourself and compassionate, and she keeps a picture, which I love this. Karen taught me to keep a picture of myself as a 2-year-old on my desk. And every time I screw something up or say something I shouldn't do, Will Smith, perfect example, lose it, or, say something to my spouse or to my partner or to my kids that I wish I hadn't said it that way. I look at that picture of myself as a 2-year-old and I say, it's okay, little buddy. Like, you just fell down. You wouldn't scream at a 2-year-old who falls down while trying to learn how to walk and say, you stupid you stupid baby, stand up, walk, keep walking. You wouldn't criticize a baby for falling or stumbling and her point is, keep that picture on your desk of yourself. And every time you go to criticize or to be rude or mean, or your self-talk says something to you that's harmful or hurtful, think about whether you would speak to that child in that same tone.
Totally. I mean, I'm laughing because I have one on my desk. Do you see me?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, because I keep it here too, because I believe in that as well. Is that, if you don't want your children to harm themselves, right, then we have to model what it looks like to have forgiveness and compassion for our own mistakes.
Right.
And self-harm, is so rampant now, where there's that sense of, and this is an epidemic in our culture now around perfection and the need to be perfect, and this self-talk that goes on when I'm not. So if we can put up signs in our house, I talk about this in my coaching program, that say, if you haven't made a mistake today, you're not growing.
Right.
To encourage mistake making, to encourage the fact that the only way that we can grow is to make a mistake. The only way to learn something new is to make a mistake. That making mistakes is cool in our family. Yeah.
That's
so making mistakes is cool. And so every time somebody makes a mistake, it's like, yeah, you want to shout it out, ring a bell. Whoa, yay, congratulations, we had a mistake today. And celebrate the mistakes. Because I think you have to have the bell and you need to do the celebration in order for there to be a way to overcome the collective consciousness, which is so much to the contrary.
I love that. I'm going to get a bell.
Get a bell. Every time somebody makes a mistake, you ring the bell, and you celebrate that they were able to just be human.
Awesome.
The human experience. And, you talk about Pia and Sam and John, and I can remember Pia and I went through a really difficult patch. And she was in high school and she was probably 16, 17. And we had a conversation where, it was a really difficult conversation. And I remember saying to her, Pia, if I had been able to have this conversation with my mother when I was your age, it would have changed my life. Those kinds of conversations where it's messy, it's hard, and everybody's heart's on the line, and we allow our children to have the full experience of whatever's going on within them and hold space for it without making it about us and our experience of it. Oh my gosh, that's transformational.
Right. And so true. And thank you for even bringing that up, because I'm deep in the heart of, some tough conversations these days with all three of my kids. And loving and messy and kind, but, tough conversations. And I think that I'm going to say exactly what you just said, which is, gosh, if I had been able to have this kind of a conversation with my own mother, it would have been life-changing for me, and I love you no matter what. I always say that to them. I'm like, there's nothing that you could do that would stop me from loving you.
That's so beautiful. My dad used to say to me, I love you warts and all.
That's cute.
And here's the thing is that my nervous system must have really believed it.
Right.
Because my relationship with my dad was so easy. There was something in me that just trusted that I was loved warts and all. I knew that there was that deep love connection in form, without the form. And it's a source of strength for me. And I knew my mother loved me. I mean, that was never the issue. It was just so much more complicated than just love.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. And honestly, I too think, at least the nurturing that I needed and the holding and the affection was there from my father. So I didn't get it in a traditional sense as a mother-daughter would get, but I feel and remember feeling deeply, affectionately loved by him, which helped at least give me a calibration for what feels right versus what doesn't feel right. Right.
Yes, exactly.
My compassion and heart goes out to those who really didn't get that from either parent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's so much more trauma around like how to self-parent. So yeah, I'm sure like people are madly looking you up right now. If they were, if you actually have a couple people on your doorstep after this podcast, don't be surprised.
Oh, that's so funny. Yes, that's great. I mean, I just want to add this one thing around, we talked about self-compassion. We talked about how important it is to allow ourselves to make mistakes too. And I just want to, reiterate that there's a lot of mommy shaming. And, it's one of those things where it's so hard to be a mom. It's just so hard to be a mom, especially when, you're critical of yourself. And with that blanket of no fault, no blame, no guilt, no shame, no fault, no blame, no guilt, no shame, no fault, no blame, no guilt, no shame, we stop making our mistakes personal. And we just accept the fact that there are patterns that flow through us and in society and the collective consciousness that are dysfunctional. It's not my fault, but my awareness of it allows me to take that and put a stake in the ground but it stops with the buck stops here. Just like you were saying, at least for me, I'm going to be the one who makes sure that these patterns don't pass down through the generations any longer.
Right.
And while I go through the yucky, messy process of cleansing that pattern from this family system, I'm going to make mistakes.
Right.
I'm going to screw up. I'm going to overstep. I'm going to have boundary issues myself. I've had some pretty intense conversations with the ring that's on the house in Venice, because Pia knows that I look at it and I watch when she comes in, when she goes, when her boyfriend leaves, when the dog goes for a walk. And she's like, Mom, that's an invasion of my privacy.
Right.
And I had to overcome my wanting to be sure she was okay all the time, irrational to, okay, I'm going to take it off my phone.
Yeah. That's a big step.
It was a big step. Yeah. I'm not going to look. And I'm going to allow you to separate and individuate and develop your own life without me looking over your shoulder.
Right. I get it. I still look at the rings that they give her. God. Shoot.
We'll talk later.
I don't work on that. So how does tell people how to find you? What's the best way?
Yes. So consciousparentingrevolution.com is the website.
Okay.
And so if you go to the consciousparentingrevolution.com, you will find everything there. And you can go in there and you'll see, my group coaching program is what I would, if anything in you is going, oh my gosh, I need to up level, then that would be the perfect place to start, is the 90-day parenting reset. Yeah. And you can find that under our courses in the website. And then we really get to spend more time together. Once a week, I do a group coaching call. And then between the coaching calls, you get into the website where all of the training materials are, the Guidance Approach to Parenting workbook, which is like 25 pages a week over the course of the 90 days, and workbook exercises and bonuses on, ways to understand anxiety in children, which right now is kind of off the charts.
Yep. And
to recognize that if you have an anxious child, the way you might be going about getting them back to school and things like that will be different than if this is just a child who's, wanting to skip a class because they've got, some great movie they want to watch. Right. But anxiety is a different thing. And there are kids right now, I've noticed through my practice, that are on strike and they are refusing to go back to school. And that to me indicates that pre-COVID school wasn't working for them. But now that they've been able to stay home and do school from home for so long, going back to something that was psychologically possibly not working for them is just not something they'll do. Right. And I say, good for them. Right. Good for them. If it wasn't working, then we need to find ways to make it work.
Right.
So, yeah.
1,000%. Well, I'm going to Costa Rica. When I come back, I don't know when the next group coaching session starts, but I'm in and I'm signing up today.
Awesome. That'll be so fabulous.
Oh man.
Will be so great to have you.
I'm not walking, I'm running into that course. Running.
Oh, fantastic.
So I just love calling you a friend. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I know you're impacting people right now and making people's kind of next thoughts, like how I just would say, don't worry about what's happened until now.
Yeah.
Like nothing's irreparable. Nothing is
true.
Something you can't, as long as you're still walking the planet and have a relationship with your children, you can make an impact and restart, reset, go about it differently. Every day is a new day. So
totally true. Totally
high five.
True. High five, girl. Thank you so much, Tracy. I could talk to you all day.
I know. You're the best. Thank you.
So are you. Mwah.
Oh. Mwah.
Thank you for tuning in to From Potential to Powerhouse, Success Secrets from Female Leaders with your host, Tracy Holland. We invite you to tune in every week. Subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review it and share it with your friends. Visit our website and follow us on social media using the links in the show notes. Until next time, high five. You've got this.